I assume pretty much everybody here, I've seen you before, so I think you know the laser is. Happens in all the locations you see here. It's been going on since January 2008. We have 4 speakers, 20 minutes each, and I go out of my way to make it as diverse as possible. My introduction is very brief because their talks are very brief, so I don't want to take their time. First speaker is Brenda Hutchinson. She's a sound artist, countless awards, but very few recordings. But some recordings are available from deep listening, and then I don't remember. Right? Okay. It's all yours. It's very casual, so.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting me, Carol. I'm really excited to be here and honored. Which one? Here, I'll get it.
And there's literature around which you're welcome to use.
Okay, there we go.
Yes, it works.
All right. Oh, perfect. Start this.
And
Going here. So, I'm really excited to be here because this is the topic, sound listening and public engagement, and it's pretty much when, it's interesting when Pierre said, oh, I have very few recordings. At a certain point, I have been working as a musician and a sound artist in the realm of public engagement, working mostly, engaging with people, strangers in social public space, people that I don't know, for the last almost 40 years. But 20 years ago, it sort of took a turn, and as we go along, you'll see I don't really do recordings anymore. It's an interesting thing of how to document this kind of work. I'm not going to talk about that now, but I did want to, since you mentioned that, I thought I would say something. Part of the reason why there's no documentation is that the work is really very experiential. And so I will talk about, I think, why sound as a medium and listening as an activity and sort of an instrument of attention is really relevant to doing this work and why it's so important. But I thought maybe the best ways to get a feel for what it's like is to have some experience, all of us to have some experience with this. So everybody should have a paper and pen or pencils. Everybody have one? Here, I have one if you want. Oh, I have one pen left, so. And what we're gonna do is, it's very quiet in here, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what I would like to do first, the clicker, hold on, I'm not used to the clicker.
Top right.
Top right, there. So what I'd like to do first is we're going to do 2 really short listening exercises or little experiments. And I will say go, and the first time for 30 seconds, what I'd like you to do is just listen to all the sounds in this room and write them down. Write down everything that you hear. Then I'll say stop, and then we'll go on from there. So, arm yourselves, your paper and pencil ready. And is everybody ready? Okay, go. Okay, that's 30 seconds, let's stop. So I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but I would like you to raise your hand. I'm going to ask you some questions. So how many people made a list? How many people have a list? Okay, you look around, most people have a list. Of that, on your list, is the list of sounds that you have in order that you heard them. How many people have, like, the first sound you heard is at the top of the list, the last sound you heard is at the bottom? Like, raise your hands, look around, okay. How many people heard a continuous sound? Okay, and how many people heard a sound repeat more than once? Okay, so, but on your list, how many people wrote down that continuous sound more than once? Nobody. How many people wrote down a repeating sound more than once? Okay, very good. So it's sort of like you're making like a grocery list. So, well, I heard that, and then you're done. So, and that's kind of a very typical way to sort of approach this for the first time around. But what you end up with, interestingly enough, is a map of your attention, and that's something that I would worth considering, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's do this again. Flip the page over. There's probably a lot of room left. And this time, 30 seconds, I'll say go. And what I'd like you to do, oh, I forgot. How many people wrote down the sounds that they heard in terms of what was making the sound, like the fan, or the activity that was involved in making the sound, like clicking, shuffling? Okay, so that's a pretty common way to do it. This time what I'd like you to do when I say go is to listen and then try to find any other possible way to describe the sound that you're hearing, not by the object that's making it or the activity. Find, you know, something else. And I'm not going to give you any hints. You might as well grapple with this and just let's just do that. So, ready? Go. Okay, stop. Okay, so maybe during the break or some other time, it would be interesting to see sort of how you described the sounds, but just for the moment, I'd like you to compare the quality of those two different listening experiences. Like the second time, how was it different than the first time? And does anybody want to say anything? I mean, yeah.
Well, I had to spend a lot more words.
A lot more words, yeah, okay.
Get a little more technical about what I was hearing.
Okay, good. Anybody else? How did it feel? Yeah.
It seemed to me it was more of a blur, a more kind of impressionistic sense than an analytic sense that in the first instance was just breaking down into constituent parts.
Okay, the second one was more of a blur?
Yeah, more
okay.
artistic.
All right, interesting. Oh, were you going to raise your hand? You moved it.
No.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah.
Yeah, the first part was more like you said, like a laundry list, like checking things off, and the second part to me was more like using a different part of my brain, like I guess the creative kind of way that I was describing the sounds that I heard, like actually like what the sound was.
Okay.
So it was a little more, I was more into the, I guess, only an active participant.
Okay, good. Yeah.
The first time, my words were much more explicit and descriptive of what was making the sound. The second time I had a much more difficult time putting it into words, but I did listen more carefully to the actual sound.
Okay, good. And that's to be kind of to be expected. I mean, it is harder, especially when you're all of a sudden you're like, oh, vocabulary. I mean, and then you have to kind of listen much more closely to try to break it apart. So that brings me to sound and listening now, and I'm going to just jump ahead here. So first I'd like to talk about sound and why I think sound is really good for this. Oh, and I should say, for me, you might want to know why I do this. Well, the whole point of working with people in social and public spaces as an artist, people that you don't know, I'm looking for ways to kind of raise the awareness of how we are connected to one another, for people to sort of take that on themselves. And through that awareness, kind of, that in itself is the point. The ways in which we are related, and then maybe by extension how we are all related to the natural world. So sound, I like sound because first of all, I can't even see it, it's always available. And always available like air. At least if you can hear. And that means that, anytime you want to check in, there it is. And it's also a medium in which we are all a part of and all connected. And so that's, an obvious one. The immersive quality of sound. Well, like if you wanted to, not see something, you'd close your eyes. But if you want to not hear something, we don't have ear flaps, so you use your attention to tune it out. Conversely, if you want to look more closely at something, you would direct your gaze and zoom in. But with sound, the only way to listen more closely or more carefully is to use your attention to do that. And once you've used your attention, you are in the present. You are totally engaged in the present moment. And which brings me to the last thing, obvious, is the time-based aspect of sound. And you know, it's this ephemeral medium where stuff happens like that. It comes and it goes, and if you're not paying attention, it's gone. And so the only way to engage with sound is to engage with the present and to become really good at doing that. Why listening? One of the qualities of listening is that it's intimate in terms of, especially if you're talking with someone or listening to a story, it requires a certain amount of proximity, usually you know, within a certain close range. And so that's one aspect of that I just keep hitting the little thing here. The other thing is that as musicians are trained and we practice to observe the minutia of the parameters of sound as they go by in time. Pitch, pitch and loudness and timbre, duration, all of these things as they relate to one another and as they go by in time, and the relationships that they form, temporal relationships. If you are performing or improvising, you're focused on these things at the same time as you're open to sort of respond to these things. And the thing is, I mean, if musicians can do it, anybody can. It's just a matter of practice and training. So anyone can, learn how to engage with listening in this very precise way. And the whole point of why that's so, I find it so amazing, is that these skills are transferable, and they're transferable to situations that aren't necessarily about sound. Let's see if I can back up again. Where you're confronted, you're dealing with people on the street that you don't know, and so it's really handy to be able to observe, the nuance of gesture or the way of voices or movement of the body movement, and then to at the same time to be open and responsive to the situation and what's going on. This was one of the high point for me. This was in Portland, and I asked someone to teach me how to apply lipstick without a mirror, and it went on for a long time, and this is finally where we ended up. But let me go forward a little bit. Okay, so the idea of public engagement is something that I've been doing, like I say, for almost 40 years. And I started out, it was more of like a studio practice where I started with family, then friends, and then out in the world, and recording stories and people, and I would gather this material, take it home, and work with it to present it in radio or performance or in some way to share the experience that happened, and also the stories and that I had recorded with other people. How do you get to Carnegie Hall was a big pivotal moment for me. This was like almost 20 years ago, and I was asked to write a piano piece. Well, I was long since interested in writing notes, but what I did is I got U-Haul to give me a truck, and I got my piano was in New York, and I drove my piano from New York to San Francisco. It took a month. I drove all over the country, and I asked people to come play my piano and to tell me piano stories, and then I would record these things. Well, I was really kind of shocked because I'd ask people, would you like to play my piano? And they would say no. No, thank you, I'm okay. No, thank you, I'm okay is like the biggest refrain that I've been hearing like all these years. And I thought, wow, well, two things. One, by the time I got to Oklahoma, I'm thinking, wow, if I don't get enough people to do this, I'm not going to have a piece, because I was still thinking of making a piece, which I did. But the other thing was like, why? It was like, wow, why don't people want to stop? What is it, about this whole situation that, people don't want to stop? And so I've been thinking, and I think, well, one of the reasons people like to help. So one of the reasons that people will stop is if you ask directions or the time. Generally, most people will stop for that. Then you get into a little grayer area. Think about like the things that you don't want to stop for, or you might not want to stop for. If somebody's asking for money, sign a political petition, religious proselytizing, I mean, any of these things. And so, and this is a necessary way to sort of navigate through public space. But there's the downside of it is when we, make up these categories and we decide, we put things in them, and then we decide whether or not to engage based on these categories. Well, would you like to play my piano is not one of these categories. And so I thought, wow, this is an amazing place. And what I have been trying to do ever since then is to like drive a wedge into that moment of that first encounter, and sort of open it up so that people might step in and think all it takes is a few seconds, and then it's like catching a fish. And, you know, decide for themselves whether or not this is something that they want to do based on, you know, not a category, but actually sussing out the situation. So I just flip through these really quick. People did come in, and it was actually quite amazing. So I found one of the best ways, the best tools was to have a really good question. And what can you do is the best question that I've come up with so far. This is a pretty recent piece that I've been doing. And it's a good question because it doesn't require yes or no. It requires just a moment to pause and think. And that's, like I say, that's kind of long enough. And so what the piece is, I've done this in a lot of places, Detroit, San Francisco, New York. Anyway, I get a team of people, and you know, for me, all these years of, you know, engaging with people, I'm the one that's benefited from all these sort of transformative, direct, intimate encounters with people. And I thought I would like to find a way to, you know, break up my hats and give them to other people so they can experience it for themselves. So with this piece, you have a partner, and you go out and you go up to someone that you don't know, and you ask them, what can you do? You want them to teach you something. So one person is the person who learns, and you try really hard. And then the other one is the witness. And the witness is just there to sort of hold that space. Everybody likes to know that they're being listened to and paid attention to. But then I thought, well, as long as they're just standing around, they can also do the documentation. So the witness is in charge of the documentation, and that can take any form that they like. And then the next time you go, you switch, and you go off down the street and talk to someone else. So maybe I'll use the clicker, let's see. So one of the first things that people will say when you ask them to do something, I'm going to flip through these as I talk, is they'll say, oh, I'm really boring, I can't do anything, I have no talent. And it's like, that's the worst thing you can allow somebody to walk away thinking, that they have no talent. And so the idea, you say, oh no, it's not about talent, it's just everybody can do something. Everybody has, this guy didn't even have a comb, he just pretended. But, and that in itself is kind of the point. I mean, it's one of these places where we can all recognize one another as people who have these amazing things that make us human that we can do. So I'll just go through some of these. A lot of people do things with their hands. There's a lot of weird genetic stuff that people can do with their tongues and their ears and stuff that is impossible to learn, but people give advice, sign language. I'll just go through these. A lot of singing and dancing with Market Street. Some people didn't want their picture taken. There's a lot of stuff people are doing out there. It's unbelievable. And you know, once people get in the spirit of it, it's pretty easy. Okay, now this one here, this was in the Tenderloin, and you know, to say that it was a difficult situation is sort of an understatement. And I was trying to get people to do things, and it was, you know, a little tense, a little hostile. Most people were not really that receptive. And this woman just stepped forward and she said, I'll teach you something. I'll teach you how to do this dance. And this dance is called the Slow Down. I'm just going to play it. Oh, here we go. I'll watch it. Totally lost me on the turn. So it was a long time for me to get this. And in the meantime, you know, people started coming around. It's like a rap that went with it. I had no idea.
They're doing it.
I mean, there's so many things you can say about this. I mean, the least of which is, you know, there's this like old white woman out there doing this, and it was, you know, and everybody's aware of it. So this is another one of the high point moments for me. Oh, really? Okay. Well then, I'm just gonna let me flip through really quick, like some of the other ones, singing and dancing, nice tongue thing, hula hoops, juggling, how to rock a baby to sleep, more tongues. Hand whistles, I bet you guys something. This guy was was sure that everybody should be able to fit themselves through a tennis racket. So there's the president of the board of directors of the Exploratorium, and he could not. But the thing is, he posted this on his own Facebook page, so I figured, you know, it was okay. And then this is just a shot from the mezzanine of the old Exploratorium of people, everybody doing these things. So I wanted to take the last 2 minutes for everyone to just turn to the person next to you, and I'd like you to teach each other something. Okay, and it can be anything, a math equation. I mean, you know, but the person has to really try to learn it. And I'll go with you. So everybody, just pair up with somebody near you. Okay. Yeah. Here, the best thing to do is.
Now move the tongue. Put your tongue between your teeth on the either side, and then
Are you looking at your nose? Can you be cross-eyed? Okay. So instead of looking at the
move it slowly, like that.
Yes, and if you think about it, all right. So let's
in that way.
Exact same spot.
So really quickly, would somebody be willing to share something that they learned how to do? I tried to learn how to count to 10 in Japanese, and I can do 3.
Oh, I
Well, okay. So anybody, it's just something, or if you could do it together, we could do together the call. So we can move one eye at a time now. Ready? Okay, so look to the left here. Ready? Here we go. That's Val. What did you do? We moved one eye at a time. Here, come over here and show us that. Ready? We'll go left first. Ready? Okay. So, okay.
You're looking in a mirror.
You can look in a mirror, but you can't really see yourself cross-eyed. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions? So what was the result of the experiment?
Which experiment?
This one.
You mean what we just did?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I actually would like to see what more people learned how to do. I mean,
I learned how to prove that 1 equals 2.
And I failed miserably to whistle.
I heard the whistling and I thought, oh, our time's up. You know, yeah.
I tried to learn to whistle too, but Dave has a secret whistle. Can you do it?
No,
Do it.
Come on, let's hear it.
Wow, that's cool.
it's technically the wall.
Tammy, do that.
Wow.
I can't do that.
I can do it manually.
There you go. Whatever it takes. I mean, it's amazing the things that we all can do. I think that's sort of result of that. It just confirms that.
How do you create sound art from this?
Yeah, well, that's I don't. I mean, what my focus on now is to figure out different ways to do this kind of thing. And documentation is a huge problem. And an interesting one. It's sort of the next place that I'm thinking of. I think a score might work. I do invitations and as a score in the form of an invitation. And instead of rehearsals, you do it. And the only way really to do it is to do it. So it's to find ways to reenact it, to have it re-happen again and again. And all of this stuff, though, I have a Facebook page and people post stuff. And I have a number of different projects. So it's blogs, Facebook, I mean, much more, even very tenuous places to do it. So it's kind of a drag. It's not like a recording, yeah.
But like, I mean, it's part of your intent to be building community and kind of showing people that I mean, in practice, that they're teachers. Is that part of it?
I think building community, absolutely. And it's a community of, like, I like to think of it as a small army, and that each time, more and more people would be willing to repeat it. And going out, like, when we were in the Tenderloin, people were like, some people said, nobody ever asks us, to teach anybody anything. It's always like the other way around. And so,
they want to teach. They want to teach them the law.
I think it's less about teaching than sharing and spending that time in that kind of attention with each other. Yeah.
What's the most interesting or fun thing that you can do now that you couldn't do before?
Oh.
And will you show it to us?
It's really hard. What I couldn't do before.
Don't look at me.
Oh. Well, you know what? Sometimes I can make that hand whistle, and I can't guarantee that I can do it, but that I could never do it before. I used to just hyperventilate.
Very good.
And I'm so pleased with that. Thank you.
Thank you.